People, Power, and Water by Antonio Lopez. Freshwater Stories. Standing on the banks of the 31st Street Collateral Channel in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago, you are immediately struck by a foul odor that emanates from the former industrial waterway some 15 feet below. Once a part of a bustling industrial transit system, the channel is now one of the most toxic waterways in the entire city. Only steps away from a new park where children and families play, the toxic water is filled with parasitic worms and heavy metals. On hot days in the summer, the water actually bubbles and releases methane into the air. I've given multiple toxic tours and taken journalists to see the 31st Street Collateral Channel up close. On one occasion, the smell was so powerful that a local newspaper writer became visibly nauseated and we had to quickly leave the site. I often remind toxic tour participants that such experiences are unfortunately a daily reality for residents in frontline communities. A legacy of neglect. Located in a low-income Latino community, the 31st Street Collateral Channel is a prime example of environmental racism in the city of Chicago. Considering that the contamination of the water has remained for decades, we have to ask some direct questions. Would this toxic waterway persist if the surrounding community were white and affluent? Why has it taken so long for the city of Chicago and Metropolitan Water Reclamation District to address an issue that community members have raised for a number of years? Why would local politicians and decision makers not be alarmed that a toxic and harmful waterway exists in the community and work urgently to at least fence off the area? These questions are asked all the time by the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization and other environmental justice organizers across Chicago and the Great Lakes Basin. Indeed, despite having deep community expertise, years of experience, and long track records of successful organizing, frontline perspectives and organizations continue to be marginalized by decision makers, researchers, and even within the environmental conservation movement. Though these communities are the most burdened by environmental hazards and have the most at stake in environmental policy, they are often excluded altogether from decision making or exploited for their outreach efforts. Frontline communities already have the solutions. Fortunately, community leaders across the region are not waiting for support from mainstream environmental organizations. In recent years, a dynamic network of EJ leaders have begun to demonstrate that the region is home to some of the most significant grassroots struggles for clean water and healthy communities. Mainly led by women of color and many times performing labor that is unseen and unheralded, EJ leaders are building coalitions and networks, influencing policy, and working with young people to develop their leadership skills. Environmental justice organizations are partnering with universities to conduct community-based research, developing creative media to share their stories of resistance, and taking direct action when needed. They are also working for stronger alignment in the environmental movement and demanding that mainstream environmental organizations discard transactional attitudes. But above all, frontline organizations are addressing state-sanctioned public health disparities and corporate practices that treat communities of color as expendable. They represent communities that are united by shared experiences of official negligence and the knowledge that oppressed people must collectively steward a just transition toward economic and environmental vitality. What urban leadership for clean water looks like. In Detroit, a city devastated by deindustrialization, local EJ organizations are at the forefront of fighting residential water shutoffs that are linked to patterns of urban displacement and exacerbated by emergency management practices. Building upon a strong Black radical tradition in Detroit, Organizations such as We the People of Detroit and East Michigan Environmental Action Council, among others, are working together to protect working class Black and frontline communities from intensifying water, housing, and public health threats. Grassroots activists have organized multiple forums and a People's Water Board to protect our water from pollution, high water rates, privatization, and the denial of water and sanitation services to people unable to afford it. EJ leaders have also published Mapping the Water Crisis, the dismantling of African American neighborhoods in Detroit, and continue to support communities in Flint, Michigan, who still endure lead-contaminated water. Through community and youth organizing, cultural production, and community-based research, Detroit-based EJ organizations lead the country in re-envisioning the post-industrial metropolis. It is more important to note that the EJ organizations mentioned and the EJ-led struggles in Detroit, Chicago, and Milwaukee are only a few examples of inspiring EJ leadership taking place across the region. Indeed, throughout the Great Lakes Basin, grassroots EJ leaders and frontline communities are leading struggles against oil pipelines and fracking and exposing the deadly links between extreme energy extraction and water contamination. It is also important to recognize that these struggles for clean water are often only one of the many environmental struggles that EJ leaders are leading in their communities.